Welcome to Moon Knight Madness. This is the Moon Knight Marathon Review, where I will be reviewing 6 different Moon Knight runs, because he is my favorite Marvel superhero. Let's begin. If you don't know who Moon Knight is, then he is veteran. He's a veteran of the military, and he was also a mercenary who one day, when he was out on a mission, was ordered to gun down these innocent civilians, and he was like, oh, it's not right, I can't do it. So then the leader of his little group, Bushman, leaves him for dead in the desert, and as he's collapsing from heat stroke in front of this Egyptian moon god statue, he gets revived supposedly by the power of the moon god Khonshu, and that's basically Moon Knight. Now, different iterations of Moon Knight will write him in a different way. Some of them say he's got multiple personality disorder. Some of them will say he doesn't have multiple personality disorder, but he uses aliases in order to get around. Some of them let the audience decide what to believe because they don't make it explicitly clear. And some of them he's a paranoid schizophrenic. And this run is the very first Moon Knight run. I have this big, thick omnibus edition, and it shows you from where he first appeared and his original run. So if you don't know how Marvel Comics work in universe, basically a character's first appearance may not be the first issue of their actual story, because the Marvel universe is like this, and your character story might just be right here, but it might connect to somebody else's story. So he originally appears in Werewolf by Night, which is a story about this guy that turns into a werewolf anytime it's nighttime. I'm pretty sure that's what it's about. I mean, I've not read it. I would like to, but finding hardcovers of it's hard, and I don't like reading stuff online. But this hardcover collects all of his first appearances and his first run. Not the whole thing, there's 2 volumes of this. Let me just say, if you're reading it in chronological order, my recommendation is reading his first appearance and then skipping everything in between to get to his issue 1 of his first run. Because in my personal opinion, all of the stuff in between is boring and it's not really worth reading, because he's basically just a background character that shows up in someone else's story for those issues. Because for collected stuff like this, they're for huge nerds that are like, oh, well, I wanted to see Moon Knight when he showed up in Stinky Fart Boys Team 27. And it's fine if you like Stinky Fart Boys Team, but you're here to read Moon Knight. You're not here to read Stinky Fart Boys Team. So I would skip that if you're not super huge into getting every single chronological thing, because the real fun starts whenever we get into Moon Knight himself's actual story. Moon Knight himself, basically, he is a street level hero. He doesn't really have any powers. He has very minor tier super strength that he gets from getting bitten by the Werewolf by Night guy. That only works when the moon's out. But that wears off over time, and let's be real, it doesn't really affect that much. So let's just say he has no powers. For most of the runs, he doesn't. And he just goes around fighting small-time crime, sometimes supernatural, sometimes not. A lot of the time it has a supernatural aspect, though, because he's sort of like a mix between Batman and Hellboy almost. Like, he's got more of the Batman-esque persona, where he's a detective, but he's got more of the supernatural vibe of Hellboy, if you've read that. Except, unlike Batman, Moon Knight's not an edgelord. He actually gets bitches, and he also has friends, and he doesn't just work by himself with some old-ass dude that lives in his house. He's got multiple friends. He's got connections. He's got street connections and street cred and all that. And he's got like a whole organization of like 5 different people working for him. So he's not a complete loner loser like Batman is. No offense, bro. But yeah, he just goes around fighting crime with his girlfriend and his friend Frenchie, who's also a vet that he served with. And he gets street information from this homeless guy named Crawley, who's like in with the underground. And he also has his girlfriend do undercover missions sometimes. And it's a pretty sick run, honestly. He ends up getting revenge on, he ends up trying to get revenge on Bushman, which is the leader that left him stranded out in the desert. And he also finds out that he has like a brother, and that's a pretty important storyline, so I won't spoil it. But for stuff from this age of comics, it's a lot more episodic and not really part of a linear storyline. And what I mean by that, if you don't know, is you could sort of pick up the story at almost any point and just be able to enjoy it from there on out, because stuff from issue 27 may not necessarily connect with stuff from issue 33, you know, unless sometimes they'll have like a multi-issue arc or something, but a lot of the time you could pretty much pick it up at any point. So yeah, I would give this first Moon Knight run, if we're not counting the in-between like first appearance stuff, I'd give this a solid 8 out of 10. I read this like every day after work and on my lunch break and whatnot, and you know what? It was fun to get through. There are some dull parts where it gets a little tough to get through, but if you just power through them, they're not long. Like the dull parts, they're gone pretty quickly. Like the story will pique your interest like this sometimes, and sometimes there's a trough, but you just got to get through that. It gets better, I promise. So that is my first rating. 8 out of 10 for the first Moon Knight run. Then we move on to Moon Knight Legacy. In Moon Knight Legacy, this is probably my least favorite Moon Knight run out of the ones that I've read. In Moon Knight Legacy, basically he's a lot more beta, which I don't really like. He's a lot more against killing people, which is a thing I really liked about Moon Knight, because I'm like, finally, a hero that kills people, because god damn do these fuckers live too long whenever they're villains. And for like Batman or some shit, or any other Avenger that's like, oh, killing's actually wrong because people can reform. Don't care. I do not give a shit. Kill them. They're terrorists. Please kill them. And Moon Knight gets it, you know. He may be insane, but my man's got some morals, and you know, they work. And this one, he's more of like unsure. He's trying to figure out if like the god is really real, like the moon god, and if he's really like. And he also, another thing is, he also fights against other Egyptian gods' avatars, because he's the moon god's avatar. Obviously, there are like other Egyptian gods in this story that he fights against. Something I don't really like about this one is that he uses his mental like disabilities as a power later on to like get into this weird mind orgy or something, and the ending's not even satisfying. He's basically just like, I guess it was the power of friendship that wins in the end, and then he fights some guy next to a campfire. Honestly, this Moon Knight story was like a 5 out of 10. Like, I didn't hate it, but it wasn't that good, and there's just, knowing how good Moon Knight can get, this was just honestly mid. So 5 out of 10 for Moon Knight Legacy. Now we move on to Moon Knight. Again, this one doesn't have a specific name, but it's written by Brian Michael Bendis. In this Moon Knight run, Moon Knight basically believes that... Someone just walked in. As I was saying, in this Moon Knight run, written by Brian Michael Bendis, Moon Knight basically believes that he has the spirit of Wolverine, Captain America, and Spider-Man, like, that he can switch out into, sort of, to solve, like, crime and whatnot. This is probably, like, my second least favorite Moon Knight run, but that's because the other ones are really good, not because it's bad. The only one I think is really kind of bad is Moon Knight Legacy. This one's actually good, but it really peaks later on. In this one, Moon Knight teams up with a couple other B-listers to go stop some shit that's happening, and it's just a pretty good one overall. And the thing I don't really like about this one is he's kind of piggybacking off of other superheroes' fame, because he'll, like, make fake Wolverine claws because he believes he's Wolverine for a little bit, or he'll make Spider-Man web shooters because he'll believe he's Spider-Man for a little bit, or he'll make a fake Captain America shield because he thinks he's Captain America for a little bit. I don't know if he actually thinks he's them, but he like believes he has the powers of them for a little bit. And honestly, that seems a little stupid in my opinion, because I prefer his OG aliases like Stephen Grant and Mark Spector and was it Crawley? I think Crawley, Jake Lockley, the cab driver one. Like, those are his OG multiple personalities, and I think they're sick. having him like sort of take the persona of other heroes was kind of mid in my opinion, but it's bad by no means. This run gets a 6.5, a strong 6.5 to a week 7 in my opinion. This is pretty nice. Then we move on to the first Moon Knight run I ever read, and is also my favorite one. This is Moon Knight by Lemire Smallwood Belair. Okay, those are the last names of the people. By probably Jeff Lemire, because he's a prominent writer. But this one is sick because I love psychological stuff in stories, and this one is heavy on the psychological aspect of Moon Knight. Throughout this whole story, you're getting visuals of supernatural stuff happening, but it's from the perspective of Moon Knight. So you don't know if any of it's actually happening or not, if any of this supernatural stuff's real or not, or if he's just fucking crazy. And it's really, really good. This is probably the best Moon Knight run of all time, in my opinion. Controversial take. A lot of people like the Brian Michael Bendis one the most. I think that one's not that good. This one, if you're really into psychological stuff, you will like this one. He's got Khonshu coming in, beating his ass and be like, "You're my avatar. You need to go kill these heathens." And then we've got him seeing shit like demons flying around in the sky, and there's pyramids coming up out of the ground, and there's a sandstorm, and he's going and fucking some shit up with some people's faces turning into undead zombies, and he's going fucking crazy, but you can't tell if it's real or not. And it's just sick as hell. All the art is awesome. The visuals are awesome, the writing is awesome, and you're not even disappointed that you don't find out whether it's real or not, because it's not important to the story. It's just a fun little cherry on top of the experience that is this run. This one gets a 10 out of 10 from me. Then we move on to the current Moon Knight run that is going on, which is written by McKay, Cappuccio, and Rosenberg. One of those is probably an artist. I don't really know which one it's written by. This is the one you could probably pick up issues for in your local comic book shop right now, depending on how far away you are in the future watching this video. Because this is just the trade paperback that came out like last year of the current run that's going on. I think they're on issue like probably 40 by now. But this one is probably Mark Spector when he's at his most sane. Like Mark Spector as in Moon Knight, I mean. Because all of his other personalities, he's learned to control them at the start of the story. By the start of the story, he's already mentally stable. And his main internal struggle, Moon Knight is always an internal struggle type of story, and I love those. And his internal struggle in this series is, if he's not crazy, then what is he even doing being Moon Knight? Because the whole reason he even started being Moon Knight was because he believed an Egyptian god was forcing him. But now he's sort of come to terms with, maybe I'm not crazy, and maybe the moon god's not real, but this is the right thing to do. And I'm going to do it regardless. So he goes around saving people still. And that's when disaster strikes, minor spoilers, when a second avatar of Moon Knight, of the Khonshu, shows up, and it's this guy. And he's like, you may be Khonshu's right-hand man, but Khonshu has 2 arms, motherfucker. And then he beats his ass, and he's like, you're a shitty avatar. I'm the real avatar. You gave up on Khonshu. I didn't. You suck. I'm awesome. Your penis is small. Mine's big. I'm black. You're white. And, just badass shit like that. He's not a villain, obviously. He just doesn't respect him. Obviously went on a little roast rant, but he just doesn't respect him. He's not necessarily an antagonist. They do team up later on because they do have common goals sometimes, but he doesn't respect him for not believing in Khonshu anymore. And this Moon Knight run isn't over, and I haven't read a bunch of it yet, but so far it's pretty entertaining all the way through. It does seem a little soulless because none of the insanity of Moon Knight's really there anymore, but I do think it's nice to have a fresh new take on the character. So I'll give this one an 8 out of 10. It's pretty solid, and it doesn't really matter that Moon Knight's not 100% crazy all the time, because I like to have characters doing well for themselves too, even though he doesn't have MPI anymore. So yeah, that 8 out of 10 for this one. Then we get into the one that I'm currently reading, which I haven't finished yet, but I've read enough of it to review it. Which is this one. This is the Hudson run. That's his last name. I mean, I don't freaking know. They never really say, they usually don't say the full name on the cover, but this one, this Moon Knight run. In this one, it's basically what you would actually expect someone's life to be like in real life if they had all the mental shit fucked up that Moon Knight really does. Like the schizophrenia, the multiple personality disorder, it's all there and it fucks up his life hard. At the beginning of the series, Moon Knight's like paralyzed from some terrible accident he was in. And all of his friends abandon him because he's going fucking crazy. And I think, okay, this is spoilers a little bit, but it's near the beginning, so it's not that much a spoiler. He killed Bushman, and he tears his face off, and he's like, he keeps it in like a little case that he keeps around, and he does weird shit with the torn off face later on, which I'm not gonna get into because that's spoilers, but it drives away his girlfriend, it drives away the homeless guy he worked with, whose name I don't remember. It drives away the black diner lady that he knows, and he worked with his sons, because she thinks he's too crazy to be around now. And he drives away Frenchie, who is his veteran friend, and his life sucks. He's constantly seeing shit. He's constantly like freaked out because people are trying to kill him, and he just doesn't know what the fuck is going on. And he's just really trying to find out, like, what am I doing, bro? Like, what is my purpose in this life? He's constantly, because Khonshu is constantly appearing to him in the form of Bushman with his face torn off, being like, you're a shitty avatar. All you do is catch these criminals and you don't even kill them. What's stopping these people from raping and murdering after they get out in 2 seconds? And stuff like that. And honestly, it's kind of hard to pick a side because on one hand, Khonshu's fucked up in the head. On the other hand, Mark's fucked up in the head. But you don't always kill someone in the situation, just like how you don't always not kill someone in the situation. And Mark does learn that over time, but he's so mentally weak, he ends up bending to the will, he ends up submitting himself to the will of Khonshu regardless. And it's just a great run. This Moon Knight run may have had great psychological aspects, but it sort of romanticizes those psychological aspects. This gives you the cold, hard truth of those psychological problems, and it makes you feel dirty right down into your core. I haven't finished this yet, but from what I've read so far, this is like a 9 out of 10. If it weren't so grisly and depressing, I'd probably give it a 10 out of 10, which it's just a personal preference of mine. But even then, I don't think it's 10 out of 10 material. The art is pretty sick too, though. Let me find a good page to show you guys. Like, this art's pretty sick. Not a lot of lighting in here, but you can pause the video and look at that if you want. Anyway, that is my Moon Knight mega review. Come back again if you want to see some more sick-ass comic reviews, bozo. See ya.